Hey, Frank and Arlo. Grandpa coming to you from Huguenot Park, down by the tennis courts. Arlo, you've been here, although you're not quite 3 years old. You were on the swings here, and you went on the sliding things and the miniature rock climbing thing. And we hung out down here. Lots happened in my life. I tore a tendon in my left ankle, the Achilles tendon. So there was a lump on there. It was stiff. It seemed like stiffness for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden it started to get a lump on it. And I thought, oh, holy crap, I got cancer again. Different kind of cancer this time, so I get to go through a whole bunch of different stuff. It turned out to not be that, but the first thing the doctor said was, you need to stop jogging, which ain't happening. I've been a runner for 40-some years now. Can't imagine. Man, I might be lying about that. It might be close to 40 years. Yeah, 40 years would be 1982, and I probably started jogging in like 84, 85. So almost 40 years. And I'd like to do that again. So now what I'm doing is I'm riding my bike a lot, which I'm allowed to do. And I joined Planet Fitness, and I ride my bike over there and I work out. I'm also in physical therapy in Ponte Vedra, and I ride my bike to that. And I always kind of like physical therapy. It makes me do things that I wouldn't normally do. I don't stretch enough, and I never did, and that's why I got this injury. So right now I want to run again, so I'm stretching a lot. I'm doing all the exercises they told me to do, and I'm trying my best to get back to being a runner. I'm not much of a runner, but I am a runner, and I'd like to continue doing that as long as I'm on this planet, spinning around and around. But I am not here today to talk to you about my physical health right now. I'm here to talk to you about something that happened probably in, I think it was 2005 or late 2004 maybe, because it was Christmas time. So whenever my son Tom went to college, when we got back from this trip that I'm going to talk to you about, Tom and I jumped in a car on New Year's Eve, and we drove for, I think it was 3 days, and got to Santa Barbara, California, and got him there because he was going to start college, I think on the 10th of January, and he had orientation and stuff like that to go to. So this was right before that. This was another one of these trips, multi-dimensional trips. Once again, we went to Costa Rica. I told you a story recently about the second most scared I've ever been in my entire life. Well, this is the story about the time that I was the most scared in my entire life. And this also happened in Costa Rica on another one of these family trips. So the first time we went to Costa Rica, we went on Thanksgiving, and they don't celebrate Thanksgiving, so we were there studying Spanish, and it was a big deal, explaining to everybody, me in English and my son Tom and daughter Courtney in Spanish to people, what Thanksgiving meant to Americans. But this time we went there, and it was Christmas time. It was beautiful. You were in this tropical place. Now, I've lived in a semi-tropical place, Miami, but this was tropical. But they love Christmas there. They celebrate Christmas. We, the first time we did homestays, but this time when we went, we stayed in a hotel right in the quote-unquote downtown of Capos, Costa Rica, on the west coast, the Pacific coast. And that's where we were the first time, in Capos. But this time we weren't going to school. We were going there to do some interesting things, and those interesting things started before we even got on the plane to go there. We wanted to make sure we could get a reservation because it was Christmas time. So we started calling around. I looked things up on the internet, and Tom was the best in the family at speaking Spanish. So Tom and I got on the phone and we called this hotel. It was called El Banco, I believe, the bank. And we got on there, and Tom asked the guy if he spoke English, and he said no. And so Tom went through all kinds of pain and anguish and semi-good Spanish, trying to explain to this guy when we were going to be there, how many of us it was, our name, and the credit card number, and all this other kind of stuff. And then at the end of the conversation, after putting Tom through all this stuff, the guy said, okay, well, let me read this back to you. And he read it in perfect English with a Spanish accent, but he was just messing with us. And Costa Ricans are like that. They just mess with you sometimes. They like to put you on. And they especially like to make you speak Spanish, no matter how bad your Spanish is. Capos on Christmas, in the Christmas season, is pretty cool. People light up their houses. It's not quite as extravagant as in the United States, but they have the Santa Claus lights, and people have Christmas trees, a lot of the same stuff. And it was enjoyable walking around in the usually not so cool Christmas season air, and seeing all this happening, and everybody was having a great time. There were soccer matches in the local soccer fields. One night when we were there was a big national soccer match, and everybody had their TV sets in front of their homes, and they were all watching it. And every time there was a good play for Costa Rica, the whole town would go nuts. You could hear like a roar going up in the background, no matter where you were. We went to church on Christmas Eve, and it was amazing. It was all in Spanish, and I didn't understand a lot of it, but they did 2 or 3 songs that I did leading worship in English in the United States. So I was really blessed going to church there. We had no idea what the sermon was about, but we had a feeling it had something to do with Christmas. And we knew certain things like Navidad and all that kind of stuff. So there were a few Navidads in there, so the guy was on point talking about Christmas. I took my guitar with me. I printed out some songs, American songs mostly. I think I had 1 or 2 Spanish songs in there, Christmas songs. But I had a couple Christmas carols and Christmas songs, and I was on this little balcony in front of the hotel overlooking the little main street, which was really, really narrow, playing my guitar, and grandmother and Aunt Courtney and Tom were out there. We're singing along to White Christmas, and all of a sudden this guy came out. He was a white guy, and the reason that I'm telling you that is because he had a buddy. This guy was a white guy, and he interrupted the song and went, "Oh wow, look at that little guitar. What is that little guitar?" And I said, "Well, it's a travel guitar." And he said, "Would you bless us with a song?" I said, "Well, I kind of was blessing us with a song before you came out here, but sure, I'll continue doing that if you'd like." So just as I started to do that, this black dude came out. They were a very interesting pair. They were folks that, I don't know if they both lived there. I know that the black guy did, because he snored so bad that he kept the entire hotel up snoring. No matter how loud people banged on the door of his room, he wouldn't get up. It was kind of an open concept hotel. There was this big area in the middle. it wasn't open to the sky. It was just open. And the walls were very thin. But even so, we were on the other side of the hotel and we couldn't get to sleep with this guy. So that was Freddie Muhammad, and his buddy's name was Brad. We never knew his last name, but we called him Brad of the Jungle because he would go for these hikes into the jungle. And he had this thing that he was obsessed with. And that was people feeding the monkeys. Because he was convinced that if humans fed the monkeys, that they would become extinct. And he'd go, those bastards, they're feeding the monkeys. Those bastards, I'd like to kill them all. He had this giant piece of wood. It was a tree trunk that fell into the rainforest there. And he was trying to figure out a way to drag that out. He was going to sell it for thousands of dollars. But something happened. It washed away in a storm or something while we were there. And he was just heartbroken. Now, Freddie Muhammad, he was also a very interesting character. He had a CD of his songs that he recorded. He was kind of a rap artist. And I say artist in the kindest manner possible. In fact, Tom had his CD. He may still have his CD someplace. The Freddie Muhammad. I don't know what happened to him. Every once in a while when I think about him, especially when I wrote this, in my notes for this, I said, no, let me see if I can find out, because maybe this guy became like a big star in some other place in the world. So we did a couple interesting things on that trip. One of the things we did is we took a bus to Hako. We didn't take both surfboards with us because one of them was too long to fit into the underside of the bus. So we only could take one of them. And I didn't go surfing. I hung out with the girls and we went shopping in Hako. But Tom got to go surfing there. The surf was killer that day. Fortunately, it didn't kill him, but it was pretty big. Surf down there is great. But none of this stuff is scary, is it? And you're wondering, when the hell are you going to get to the scary part, Grandpa? So here it comes. We went up to a place called the Garden of Eden. Now, what we were going to do is we were going to ride horses up the backside of a mountain and then rappel down the front side of that mountain. And it was, I think they said it was 100 feet in the literature. I don't know if it was actually 100 feet, but that's what they said. Or maybe they said 120 even. But they had all these things that you could do. You could camp up on ledges 100 feet above the ground, and it was all this confidence building stuff. And if you know me, you know I'm afraid of heights, and I'm always trying to get over that fear, and I never can, but that doesn't deter me from at least trying. So I signed us up. Now, your grandmother definitely wasn't going to ride a horse, although she did ride a horse when we were in Jamaica. But she wasn't going to ride a horse up a mountain and then rappel down the other side of it. So we get to this place. And when things like this start, you think, well, how scary could it be? How big could it be? And they don't take you to the front part to show you it first. They take you to the back part, and it's all switchbacks going up the mountain, going back and forth and back and forth. And so they put us on our horses. I was on a horse called Jamario. I don't remember what everybody else's horse's name was. Courtney was on there for about 10 seconds. The horse did something. Courtney didn't like it. And she just looked at me and said, "Get me off this horse." I'm like, yeah, this whole thing's going to go really well. so I don't know how, but Courtney didn't get off the horse. She rode the horse. And we started to go up the mountain. Now, it wasn't that bad. It was kind of steep on the side of the mountain, but if the horse stayed in the middle of the path, you didn't have to look over. You could just look ahead. And if you remember from me talking about the amazing Spider-Man, if I'm not looking up or down, I'm not afraid. So we're going up, but then all of a sudden, Jamario started to say, hey, I'm hungry. And he went over to the edge of it's almost like a cliff. And he started to bend over. And he almost made me roll over the front of him and down off the side of this mountain. Now, it wouldn't be like going down a sheer cliff because it was a switchback. But it wouldn't have been fun, and I would have got hurt, and I could have died. And the guy said, lean back. And I went, what? Lean back. When the horse goes forward, lean back. So I started to sing. When Jamario goes downhill, lean back, lean back. When Jamario goes uphill, do anything, but don't lean back. Because then you'd fall on the back of your head. So we made it up to the top. And all I'm thinking about at this point in time is, hey, that was fun. We rode these horses. This friggin' horse was going over the side, almost made me roll down the mountain, but it all worked out. Hey, I'm ready for the next thing. Well, I didn't realize that I really wasn't ready for the next thing. Now, at the time, Tom was in the United States Marine Corps. He probably had rappelled before, maybe out of a helicopter, but at least down a steep wall. Courtney had never done anything like that before. The first time we were in Costa Rica, we went on a zip line thing, and there was a straight down zip line, so they called it rappelling. But it was like maybe 20 feet, 30 feet at the most. So it wasn't that bad. And I just looked straight forward. And in my mind, this was going to be kind of like that. But it wasn't. We were at this waterfalls. We were at the side of the waterfalls with the water rushing past us. And there were these two rappel lines that were anchored at the top. And so they called Tom up. And Tom disappeared, whoop, over the edge. And I thought, wow. Now, I hadn't really looked over yet, but I knew he disappeared. I knew it wasn't like he could stand at the bottom and look over the top. And they said it was 100 feet. So I started thinking about, like, hey, what's 100 feet like? Ooh, that's a lot. And remember how scared I was when I was up 30 or 40 feet during the amazing Spider-Man story. So Courtney they called Courtney up. She looked over at me with this sad look, and I said, oh man, this has to be really scary for Courtney. So I just looked at her and I smiled and went, you got this. And she went over. And all of a sudden, I realized that I could not do this. That I was too scared to do this. That I was going to ride the friggin' horse back down the mountain. I don't care if he bucked me off the front, down the side of the mountain or not. There was no way I was going to do this. And just as the guy said, okay, big guy, you're up, I had a vision. And the vision that I had was your grandmother's face. She kind of looked like the Wizard of Oz face, but she wasn't, there was no smoke and lightning coming out. It was just her face in my mind. And she was quietly speaking to me. And she said, "Okay, Frank, let's see if I understand this. You let your youngest son and my only child go off the side of a mountain on a rope. But you're too afraid to do that. Is that right?" And I'm thinking, yeah, that's right. She said, "Well, why are you afraid?" And I said, "I'm afraid I'm going to die." "Oh, so it's okay for our children to die. You let them do that. But it's not okay for you to die. I'll talk to you when you get to the bottom." And before I knew it, I jumped up and I went over. They clipped me onto this giant rope. It was thick. It was like a gym rope in gym class, but it seemed like it was even thicker than that. It was a long time ago, but that's what it seemed like. And I started to go over the side. I was a little bit out of shape at the time. I think I had just had a knee surgery and was coming back from that. And I got over and I was kind of sticking straight out. I was maybe a step or two down. And I said, "No, I can't do this. I'm going back up." So there was a guy next to me, because they had a guide with you, and he was also rappelling down. And he said, "Frank." Now, this was a real voice coming from a real person. This wasn't your grandmother in my head. He said, "Frank." And I looked at him and I went, "What?" And he said, "Breathe. Breathe." So I started to breathe, and he said, "That's it. Now I'm going to tell you something. You took the biggest step of this. You went off the ledge. I'm going to tell you something else. The law of physics will not permit you to go back up there. You're going to go down. But you have to ask yourself a question. Do I want to go down afraid, with my eyes closed, not breathing? Or do I want to enjoy it?" He said, "Look around." And I peeked around. He said, "This is probably one of the most beautiful places you've ever been to in your entire life. Let's enjoy the trip down." And I did. Little did I know, the people at the bottom could control you. If they wanted to, they could kind of make it taut, and you couldn't come down. Even if you let your hands go, you couldn't free fall down there. They were in complete control. And the guy told me that. In fact, he went down and then came back up, upside down, and was waving to me and saying stupid stuff, because Costa Ricans love to say stupid stuff to you. It was amazing. It was one of the most beautiful places I had ever been to. And when I got to the bottom, I didn't have to have that talk with your grandmother that I imagined at the top of the mountain. When she said, "How was it?" I said, "Piece of cake, baby." Peace out, guys.